The night swallows everything. Rain hammers the steel decks. Lightning splits the darkness over a small volcanic island called Savo. And in the waters around it, 37 American and Australian warships stand guard. It's August 9th, 1942, just past midnight. The officers are exhausted. Most haven't slept in 48 hours. Half the crews are at rest. The radar screens flicker with rain clutter. No one sees what's coming. Then, without warning, parachute flares burst open above the southern screening force. Brilliant white light floods the water, freezing the Allied cruisers in perfect silhouette. For 3 endless seconds, no one understands. Then the darkness erupts. Searchlights, torpedoes, shells. The Japanese are here. In 37 minutes, 4 Allied heavy cruisers will be at the bottom of the sea. Over 1,000 men will be dead, and the United States Navy will suffer the worst defeat in its history. This is the Battle of Savo Island, the night America learned that the ocean has no mercy, and that overconfidence is the deadliest weapon of all. If you want to witness more untold stories of naval warfare, subscribe and hit the bell. History doesn't wait. August 7th, 1942. The Solomon Islands. After the catastrophic loss at Pearl Harbor and the hard-won victory at Midway, the United States launches its first major offensive of the Pacific War. The target, Guadalcanal, a humid, jungle-covered island where the Japanese are building an airfield that could threaten the entire Allied supply line to Australia. 16,000 U.S. Marines storm ashore in Operation Watchtower. The landings catch the Japanese completely by surprise. By nightfall, the Marines have seized the unfinished airstrip and renamed it Henderson Field. But the easy part is over. Now the ships have to stay. The transports are still unloading supplies when Japanese bombers from Rabaul, 600 miles to the northwest, begin their relentless attacks. The Allied fleet is commanded by a patchwork of officers. American Vice Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher controls the carrier groups offshore. Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner commands the amphibious transports. And British Rear Admiral Victor Crutchley, on loan to the Royal Australian Navy, leads the screening force of cruisers and destroyers protecting the vulnerable transports. Crutchley's force is powerful on paper, 8 cruisers, 15 destroyers. But they're spread thin, exhausted, and completely unprepared for what's about to happen. 600 miles away, in the Japanese stronghold of Rabaul, Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa receives word of the American invasion. He's a cautious but aggressive officer, a veteran of Pearl Harbor and Midway, respected throughout the Imperial Navy for his tactical skill. He knows he has to act fast. The Americans are vulnerable while their transports are still anchored. If he can destroy the screening force, he can annihilate the unprotected supply ships and leave the Marines stranded without food, ammunition, or hope. Mikawa assembles what he can, 7 cruisers and 1 destroyer. His flagship, the heavy cruiser Chokai, will lead. Behind her, 4 more heavy cruisers from Cruiser Division 6 under Rear Admiral Aritomo Goto, Oba, Kinugasa, Furotaka, and Kako. Then the light cruisers Tenru and Yubari, and finally the destroyer Unagi bringing up the rear. It's a newly formed task force with almost no time to train together. But Mikawa has one overwhelming advantage. His crews are masters of night combat. For years, the Imperial Japanese Navy has drilled relentlessly in the art of fighting in darkness. They know how to use the night. The Americans don't. At 2:30 p.m. on August 7th, Mikawa's column departs Rabaul and heads southeast down the narrow channel the sailors call the Slot. The Allies should have seen them coming. On the morning of August 8th, an Australian coast watcher on Bougainville radios a sighting, enemy ships moving south. A U.S. submarine, S-38, detects what sounds like heavy cruisers passing overhead. B-17 bombers returning from a raid on Rabaul spot Mikawa's columns steaming through St. George's Channel. The intelligence is fragmented, delayed, incomplete, but it's there. None of it reaches the right people at the right time. Admiral Turner requested extra reconnaissance flights over the slot that afternoon. Admiral John McCain, commanding land-based aircraft in the South Pacific, never orders them and never tells Turner they weren't flown. Turner mistakenly believes the corridor is under constant surveillance. It isn't. Meanwhile, Fletcher's carriers have 15 scout planes sitting on their decks, fueled and ready. They're never launched. Instead, they sit there as floating bombs, a fire hazard waiting to happen. By late afternoon, Fletcher makes a decision that will haunt the campaign. Citing fuel shortages and aircraft losses from the Japanese air raids, he requests permission to withdraw his carriers. Permission is granted. At 6:07 p.m., Fletcher's 3 carriers turn south and steam away, taking with them all the Allied air cover. The Marines and the screening force are now alone. As darkness falls, Crutchley divides his screening force into 3 groups to cover the approaches around Savo Island. The southern group, HMAS Australia, HMAS Canberra, USS Chicago, and 2 destroyers, patrols between Savo Island and Guadalcanal. The northern group, USS Vincennes, USS Astoria, USS Quincy, and 2 destroyers, guards the passage between Savo and Florida Island. An eastern group of light cruisers and destroyers watches the rear approaches. 2 radar-equipped destroyers, USS Blue and USS Ralph Talbot, are posted as pickets west of Savo Island to provide early warning. It looks good on paper, but the Allied crews are running on fumes. They've been at battle stations for 2 straight days in stifling tropical heat with almost no sleep. The ships are set to condition 2. Half the crew rests while the other half stands watch. Radar is primitive. No one fully understands its limitations. Rain and nearby land masses create false echoes. The destroyer pickets are uncoordinated, leaving a 12-mile gap between their patrol patterns. And, crucially, no one believes the Japanese will attack at night. The Allies are confident. After Midway, there's a feeling that American technology and firepower make victory inevitable. That confidence is about to be shattered. At 10:30 p.m., Turner summons Crutchley and Marine General Alexander Vandegrift to a conference aboard his flagship, the transport USS Macaulay. The topic? Fletcher's withdrawal means the transports and their escorts must leave by morning. The Marines will be left with only a fraction of their supplies. It's a disaster in the making, but there's no choice. The meeting drags on past midnight. Crutchley makes a fateful decision. Instead of returning to his patrol station in the dark and risking a collision or friendly fire incident, he takes HMAS Australia to stay near the transports. This removes the most powerful ship from the southern screening group. Before leaving, Crutchley puts Captain Howard Bode of USS Chicago in command of the Southern Force, but somehow neglects to clearly inform anyone. Bode assumes Crutchley will return shortly. He doesn't reposition the ships, he doesn't issue night orders, he goes to bed. Meanwhile, Mikawa's column is closing fast. His crews have been at battle stations since sunset. Every flammable item on deck has been jettisoned. At 6:30 p.m., Mikawa sends a blinker signal to his ships. In the finest tradition of the Imperial Navy, we shall engage the enemy in night battle. Every man is expected to do his utmost. The Japanese are ready. The Allies are asleep. Mikawa's approach is nearly perfect. Overcast skies and intermittent rain squalls hide his ships from aerial observation. He times his attack to arrive in pitch darkness, when Allied aircraft can't operate. Throughout the day, his cruisers have launched float planes for reconnaissance. By the time of the attack, he has a nearly complete picture of the Allied dispositions. He knows the screening force is divided. He knows Savo Island splits them into northern and southern groups. His plan is simple. Sweep south of Savo, Annihilate the southern force with torpedoes and gunfire, then turn north and destroy the northern force before they can react. After that, if time permits, hit the transports. Then withdraw under cover of darkness before Allied carrier aircraft can retaliate at dawn. At 12:40 a.m. on August 9th, Mikawa's column passes Savo Island in single file at 24 knots. Chokai leads. The 7 cruisers and 1 destroyer move in perfect formation. 3 minutes later, lookouts on Chokai spot the destroyer USS Blue, 5 miles away, patrolling on a reciprocal course. Mikawa holds his breath. If Blue sees them, the surprise is over. But incredibly, Blue completes her turn and steams away without spotting the 2-mile-long enemy column barely visible in the darkness. The Japanese have slipped through the first net. At 1:31 a.m., Japanese lookouts sight the Southern Screening Force. HMAS Canberra is in the lead. Behind her, USS Chicago. The range is closing rapidly. Mikawa's crews are trained for this moment. They've drilled it 1,000 times. At 1:43 a.m., Japanese float planes drop parachute flares. The sudden burst of white light illuminates Canberra and Chicago, freezing them in harsh silhouette. For 3 seconds, the Allied crews stare upward in confusion. Some think it's a friendly aircraft. Others assume it's a reconnaissance plane. Then the torpedoes are in the water. The Type 93 Long Lance torpedoes, the most advanced in the world. Oxygen-powered, wakeless, nearly invisible, with a 1-ton warhead and a range of 22 miles. The Japanese cruisers fire them in salvos, then open up with their main guns. Seconds later, the first torpedoes slam into Canberra's starboard side. 2 hits. The cruiser shudders violently. Then the shells arrive, over 20 salvos of 8-inch fire in less than 5 minutes. Canberra's bridge is shattered. Captain Frank Getting is killed instantly. The engine rooms flood. Fires erupt across the deck. The Australian cruiser, dead in the water and blazing, drifts helplessly. USS Chicago takes a torpedo in the bow. Her captain is wounded. She turns away into a rain squall, firing blindly. USS Patterson, one of the destroyers, spots the enemy ships and radios a warning. Warning, warning, strange ships entering harbor. But it's too late. The Japanese column is already among them. Patterson opens fire and launches torpedoes, but she's hopelessly outgunned. Within minutes, she's hit by shells that kill 10 men. The Southern force is annihilated in less than 6 minutes. Canberra is dying, Chicago is fleeing, Patterson is crippled. Mikawa's column doesn't stop. They sweep around Savo Island, splitting into 2 groups to approach the northern force from both sides. The northern group, Vincennes, Quincy, and Astoria, has seen the flares to the south. They've received Patterson's warning, but they're just sounding general quarters when the Japanese searchlights snap on. Suddenly, the 3 American cruisers are caught in a deadly crossfire. Quincy's captain gives the order to open fire, but the gun crews aren't ready yet. Within minutes, Quincy is hit by shells from Ooba, Furutaka, and Tenru on one side, and torpedoes from the light cruiser column on the other. The bridge is a slaughterhouse. Fires rage out of control. At 2:10 a.m., a shell kills or wounds almost everyone on the bridge, including the captain. Quincy's crew fights desperately. One of their salvos strikes Chokai's chart room just 6 meters from Admiral Mikawa, killing or wounding 36 men. But it's not enough. At 2:38 a.m., Quincy rolls over and sinks bow first, taking 389 men with her. USS Vincennes is caught in the same crossfire. She's hit 74 times by shells and at least 1 torpedo. Her captain, Frederick Reefcoal, orders a turn to starboard to unmask his guns, but the cruiser is already dying. Fires consume her superstructure. Her steering fails. At 2:50 a.m., Vincennes capsizes and sinks, killing 342 men. USS Astoria fights longer. Her captain initially thinks the chaos is friendly fire and orders his guns to cease fire, a fatal hesitation. By the time he realizes the truth, Japanese shells are already tearing through his ship. Astoria's gunners score hits on the Japanese cruiser Chokai and possibly others, but she's burning from stem to stern. She stays afloat until noon on August 9th, then finally rolls over and sinks, taking 235 men to the bottom. In 37 minutes, the Japanese have sunk 3 American heavy cruisers and crippled the Australian Canberra beyond repair. The Imperial Navy has barely a scratch. Some light damage to Chokai, Kinugasa, and Awaba. 58 Japanese sailors dead. And then, inexplicably, Mikawa orders his force to withdraw. The Allied transports are still there, anchored and defenseless, loaded with supplies and ammunition. If Mikawa presses the attack, he can destroy them all and doom the Marines on Guadalcanal to starvation and defeat. But he doesn't. At 2:20 a.m., with victory in his grasp, he orders his ships to turn north and withdraw up the slot toward Rabaul. Why? Mikawa fears daylight. He knows, or thinks he knows, that American carriers are somewhere to the south. If he stays to attack the transports, dawn will find his cruisers still within range of carrier aircraft. Without air cover, his ships will be slaughtered. He's been ordered by Tokyo to avoid unnecessary losses. Better to take the tactical victory and live to fight another day. It's a reasonable decision based on the intelligence available to him. But it's wrong. Fletcher's carriers withdrew hours ago. They're already out of range. Mikawa could have annihilated the transports and escaped unharmed. He'll never know. The Japanese column steams north in the darkness, leaving behind a sea of burning oil, floating wreckage, and hundreds of men struggling in the water. The area will soon be known by a new name, Iron Bottom Sound. As dawn breaks on August 9th, the full horror becomes clear. Canberra is still burning, listing heavily to starboard, her decks awash. Commander John Walsh, the wounded second-in-command, orders the crew to abandon ship. At 8 a.m., American destroyers move in to finish her. They fire 263 rounds of 5-inch shells and 4 torpedoes. Only 1 torpedo detonates. Finally, USS Ellet fires a single torpedo that sends Canberra to the bottom. 84 Australians are dead. Quincy, Vincennes, and Astoria are already gone. Chicago limps away with a gaping hole in her bow. She'll spend 6 months in dry dock. The destroyers Patterson and Ralph Talbot are damaged. The human cost is staggering. 1,077 Allied sailors dead, over 700 wounded. It's the worst open-water defeat in U.S. Navy history. News of the disaster is so shocking that Admiral Ernest King delays telling President Roosevelt for days. Turner orders the remaining ships to withdraw immediately. The transports leave before unloading is complete. The Marines on Guadalcanal are left with only half their supplies and no naval support. For the next several weeks, Japanese warships will dominate the waters around Guadalcanal, especially at night, bombarding Henderson Field and reinforcing their troops. The Japanese don't escape unscathed. On August 10th, as Mikawa's force returns to base, the heavy cruiser Kako is spotted by the American submarine USS S-44 off the coast of New Ireland. S-44's captain, Lieutenant Commander Henry Munson, fires a spread of 4 torpedoes. 3 hit. Kako breaks in half and sinks in less than 5 minutes, taking 71 men with her. It's small revenge, but it's something. Back in the United States, a formal board of inquiry is convened. The Hepburn investigation, led by Admiral Arthur Hepburn, interviews every major Allied officer involved. The report is damning. It finds that the defeat resulted from complete surprise. But that surprise was the result of systemic failure, poor reconnaissance, divided command, inadequate communication, radar operators who didn't understand their equipment's limitations, exhausted crews, overconfidence bordering on arrogance. The report recommends official censure for Captain Howard Bode of the Chicago for failing to warn the fleet. It stops short of formally reprimanding Admirals Fletcher, Turner, McCain, or Crutchley, but the criticism is implied. Captain Frederick Reefcohl of the Vincennes never commands ships again. On April 19, 1943, upon learning the full extent of the report's criticism, Captain Bode shoots himself in his quarters in Panama. He dies the next day. The Battle of Savo Island changes everything. The easy American confidence after Midway evaporates. The U.S. Navy realizes it has catastrophically underestimated Japanese night-fighting capabilities. Admiral Turner later admits, "The Navy was still obsessed with a strong feeling of technical and mental superiority over the enemy. In spite of ample evidence as to enemy capabilities, most of our officers and men despised the enemy and felt themselves sure victors in all encounters under any circumstances. The net result was a fatal lethargy of mind." For the Marines on Guadalcanal, the situation becomes desperate. Japanese destroyers, nicknamed the Tokyo Express or Rat Run, race down the slot every night, bombarding Henderson Field and landing reinforcements. The Marines are outnumbered, outgunned, low on food and ammunition, and fighting in malarial jungle heat. But they hold. Henderson Field becomes operational, and its aircraft begin to turn the tide. Over the next 6 months, the waters around Guadalcanal will see 4 more major naval battles. Cape Esperance in October, the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal in November, Tassafaranga in November, and Rennell Island in January 1943. Each one is savage and costly. The Allies slowly learn to fight at night. The Japanese slowly bleed out. In hindsight, Mikawa's decision not to attack the transports may have saved the Allied campaign. Had he destroyed the supply ships that morning, the Marines might have been forced to evacuate Guadalcanal. The entire Pacific strategy might have collapsed. But he didn't, and the Marines held, and Henderson Field became an unsinkable aircraft carrier that the Japanese could never neutralize. By February 1943, Japan evacuates its remaining troops from Guadalcanal. The tide has turned. The wrecks still lie on the bottom of Iron Bottom Sound. Quincy, Vincennes, Astoria, Canberra, Caco, and dozens of other ships that will follow them in the months ahead. They're steel tombs for the men who fought there, a reminder that war is won not by technology or numbers alone, but by training, discipline, coordination, and the will to learn from catastrophic mistakes. Savo Island remains the worst defeat in U.S. Navy history, but it's also the moment the American Navy grew up. The lessons learned in those 37 minutes of hell about the importance of reconnaissance, communication, command clarity, and respect for the enemy would shape naval doctrine for the rest of the war and beyond. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical and documented sources.